Okay, a very warm welcome to everyone to this session. Those who don't know me, I am Iván Arriagada, CEO of Antofagasta Minerals, which is one of the 10 largest copper producers in the world. And I'm very pleased that we're able to co-host this session with the International Council on Mining and Metals, an organization which brings together around a third of the mines and metals which are produced globally. So I really thank ICMM for the opportunity to co-host this session. I want to say that we as miners are very passionate about what we do. We think that mining is good for society. It's required to address some of the main challenges that we face today, like climate change being one of them. We have worked over the years with sustainability as a core theme, and I would say climate change being another. But I think now nature has been elevated to a level similar or beyond even climate change, and therefore we're very pleased that last night we were able at the forum to release a position statement on nature, which talks about our commitment and our responsibility to halt and reverse nature loss and work for positive nature outcomes. So I think that's a very important element, and we will be talking today about what we're doing now and what we plan and can do in the future for this purpose. So having said those introductory words, I will pass them on to Ro, who is the CEO of ICMM.
Iván, thank you so much. We're going to kick off the panel shortly, but before that, some opening remarks from Jack from the World Economic Forum.
Hi, good. Is this working? Yes, it is. Excuse me, I apologize. First of all, I want to apologize for starting 5 minutes late. I think this is, sorry, I'm getting better instructions. Tell me when to stop. Well, I don't want to stand in front of these. Okay. Can I go over here or no? Okay. Thank you. Are we all set now? I apologize. As I said, I apologize for making sure that we start late. That was due to a scheduling challenge. So my name is Jack Hurd. I co-lead the nature work here at the World Economic Forum. I also run something called the Tropical Forest Alliance. And we're really pleased to be able to be participating in this event. This is a serious business, and it's a serious part of our future. We know that minerals and mining and metals are very much part of where we're going as society. They've been part of our past, but very much important in our society going forward, around the sustainable transition in energy, around communications, around the built environment. This is a really important part of our future. And so the leadership here about getting this right is equally important. Now, when we sort of look at the world and we look at it from the nature space in my part of the World Economic Forum, we know that, approximately 45–50% of large-scale infrastructure in the metals and mining industry is either co-located or adjacent to areas of significant ecological, biological importance, whether that's tropical rainforests or it's other critical ecosystems, desert systems, grassland systems, et cetera. And the metals and mining industry has been really at the forefront of looking at these environmental issues and environmental impacts and social impacts for many years. It's very interesting, the point that Iván has mentioned about climate has been important for the industry, and now nature is coming back or coming on board. I suspect that also if we look back around 20 years, many industries, including this sector, has been probably more focused on nature in the past, and then all of a sudden climate came along in a really big way and sort of overtook a lot of our interests. Rightly so, I might say. In any event, I think that it's fantastic that the principles were launched last night, and I congratulate ICMM on putting forward those sets of principles. It's going to be instrumental in helping to meet the ambitious goals and aspirations of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Here at the World Economic Forum, we're working on a series of transition pathway documents and processes that we're putting together. Metals and mining and minerals are going to be a really important part of that transition pathway. We expect that what this will produce is a set of goals and aspirations in the industry, and it will be very closely tied to the principles that were released last night. Theoretically, other industries are going to be following in a similar pathway where we've outlined some ideas and things that the industry should really be thinking about in terms of assessing its impacts and dependencies, both on the ecological factors as well as on social factors as well. And again, this sector is way out in front of a lot of other industries on that, which is fantastic, and it's necessary given the importance of the industry in the work going forward. So I really, this is going to be a fantastic panel. I'm really appreciative for the opportunity to be here, so thank you. And I want to hand it over to you, Ro, for taking us forward. Thanks very much.
Jack, thank you so much. And we really appreciate the World Economic Forum's partnership with us on nature and on the suite of sustainability issues we look at. You're all very welcome to this panel, and to those of us tuning in online, you're very welcome too. I have with me 4 really fantastic people, and because they're so fantastic, I might add nothing to this conversation other than a colorful vest. So at least I add something, but there you go. Ivan and Jack both mentioned the commitments that we launched yesterday, and actually, Jack, I have to say these principles are really binding commitments for the ICMM members, and frankly, that's really why people hopefully pay notice, because this isn't just lip service talk, or as our Swedish friend might say, blah, 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 because these are things that we are committed to doing. And as Eduardo, who we'll hear from later, said last night too, we walk the talk on everything we do at ICMM. So before we go into the panel, I'll just give you a very quick snapshot of what those commitments actually are, and you'll be able to find full details of these on nature.icmm.com. The key thing for you to understand about these commitments is that they start very much at our direct footprint and impact, and you'll hear a recognition from Hilda, Jonathan, and Ivan that we're very conscious of the direct impact we have, but they don't end there, because that's about minimizing our own impact, but really it's about having a positive influence on the way that nature is managed across the entire economic system. So let me tell you about the 4 areas that our commitments cover. When it comes to our direct operations, we've committed, in fact reinforced previous commitments we've made and added new ones. But really what it's about is following the mitigation hierarchy to ensure at least no net loss of biodiversity at closure at all the 650 approximately sites across the ICMM portfolio against a 2020 baseline. Now when it comes to our direct operations, that comes on top of a long-standing commitment we've had over 2 decades that we will not mine in World Heritage Sites. There's more you can read about when it comes to our direct operations, but that's the cornerstone. When it comes to our value chains, and you'll hear from all of them how important it is, and Martin, this is why we're so happy to have you here, because we've committed to work with our customers and suppliers to make sure that we minimize the impact through the value chains. You might think of this, as Jonathan says, as a scope 3 of nature when it comes to helping make a positive impact through our value chain. So we'll be working with our suppliers and customers. We'll be expecting them to do their own nature impact and dependency assessments as well. Now, when it comes to our landscapes, and here you will hear from the panel on how we work with others in the regions in which we operate. We are some of the biggest landowners where we work, but equally we work with others too. And when it comes to our landscapes, companies have some optionality here because every landscape is different. I mean, just between the 3 of you, you operate in such different environments. And so companies will choose to either work on regeneration, restoration of land, or of course working with other landscape owners on partnerships that help restore nature. And then I said that this is about changing the wider economic system. So when it comes to the wider economic system, again, companies will either choose to invest in research and development to reduce the impacts of mining, or they're going to work with different actors in the financial system to support sustainable financing mechanisms. Those are the 4 areas. As I said, it starts with our direct operations, into our value chains, into the landscapes, into the wider economic system. The final piece of the puzzle is about how transparent we are committing to being about what we've done and the impact it's had. And when it comes to this, we are doing what a responsible company should be expected to do, which is to integrate nature into our decision making, to disclose our key material impacts and dependencies, and of course to work with others to improve the rate of metrics and the nature of metrics in the wider economic system to promote nature positive outcomes. So you can read more about these commitments on the nature.icmm.com hub. And as Ivan has said, what we really hope is that the wider industry also joins us in adopting these. These are conditions of membership for the 24 companies in ICMM. It's not optional. But seeing a number of the other leaders from our industry here in this room, I really encourage others to adopt similar commitments, maybe even go higher. Wouldn't that be nice? And of course, don't just stop at mining. We hope our friends in forestry, agriculture, other sectors also end up taking similar collective action, so that the net result, of course, is the reason we're doing this, which is that nature is better off. Now, let's get into the panel. And let me just once again acknowledge and thank very much Ivana Regada, our chairman, and the reason we've been able to bring this panel together for Antofagasta's sponsorship of this. Martin, I'll start with you. Your company manufactures very big things, buses, trucks, not cars, because you sold the cars business earlier. But of course, I like to say that all the things you make are born in a mine, because ultimately they're made of the metals and minerals that we produce. So what have been your expectations of our industry on nature?
Thank you for that question, and thank you everyone for being invited. It's, I think, a good sign of what the World Economic Forum is all about, that we are coming together, working together. And as a matter of fact, not only actually starting and born there, but we are actually delivering quite a lot of equipment into also the sites, both when it comes to trucks, but also construction equipment, excavators and dump trucks and articulated dump trucks, etc. So we are very keen, and I love the industry, by the way, because that is an industry with so many fascinating things. And congratulations, I think, also to all of you that you are committing together with also concrete manners. Because for us, obviously, as the Volvo Group, we have to be fossil-free by 2040 in order to, because we have at least a 10-year rolling fleet, right, out in the market. So to be that 2050 globally, 2040, everything that we do in products and solutions globally must be fossil-free. And the North Star for us that has been discussed here is, of course, the Scope 3. So it is a lot about, the climate change and the fossil-free journey. But having said that, it is like, you can say, okay, I want to have good quality. But on that road, you also need to have the right cost, and you need to have the right delivery, etc. It's exactly the same here. And that's the reason why we rely so much on you guys. In order to get there, the big issue for us is to cooperate in the value chain upstreams. That is approximately 10-15% of our total emissions. And of course also downstreams, products in use where we hopefully can be supportive. My point is that we need to rely on you. And we have learned so much. And we have 55,000 suppliers globally.
55,000.
And we have learned so much over, the last 3-4 years when it comes to operating in the ecosystem. Just take the semiconductors as one example. It's not enough anymore to just be connected to the tier ones. We need to be connected in the whole value chain and understand what is happening. And your initiatives that you're doing here is making us comfortable that the CO2 decarbonization journey is not coming to the expense of biodiversity or also the social aspects. Because the triangle, and it's the same with the energy transition, by the way, it is the balance between affordability, availability, and sustainability. And we need to decide where we position ourselves here in order to make that balance be right. And therefore, we are super excited to work in different contexts. For example, the First Mover Coalition, where we try to be really showing the way by having clear and long-term off-take agreements where we are heading, what we are ready to pay, innovate together, and go about it in aluminium, in steel. We need to do it all over the place, by the way. And we are super happy that we're doing it together. As late as in November then, we announced together with Norsk Hydro a big off-take agreement when it comes to low-carbon aluminium. But we know also that Hydro in turn is working upstream with what we just heard about the triangle: social, biodiversity, climate change. And happy to be here and contribute.
Martin, I love that. I love how you describe that triangle. So let me ask you this. Would you, if say you have two suppliers, are you prepared to say you would rather work and you would deliberately choose to work with a supplier that better meets that triangle, even if it costs you more?
Yeah, and that is the beauty also about getting started. Because we got started, what is it now, 2 years ago with fossil-free steel, together with LKAB and SSAB, and also Vattenfall, And we said, because the funny thing was that they said, okay, but we only have 800 tons. And US miners and the steel mills, etc. If you don't produce 2 million tons, you're not in production anyhow, right? But we said, let's take these 800 to get started. And the reason why we want to get started, for us to learn, but also for our customers downstream to learn. Okay, so we went to the CRH of the world, or we went to, the Skanskas of the world, utilizing the equipment that we did choose. That was actually construction equipment, and said, are you ready to go about it? So we really connected dots here, and absolutely, we understand, especially now, it will be a premium on that. But with carbon pricing, that will come, regardless. Either it will come publicly and internationally, or it will come in the corporate sector. And we are already incorporating that in our sourcing decisions. Obviously, that will be a competitive advantage.
Great.
On the carbon footprint, but also that we have partners that can work in the triangle of, as we have heard here, biodiversity, and climate and social aspects.
Perfect. Now, Jonathan, you're not Canadian, but you lead one of Canada's premier companies, so you must have imbibed some Canadian attributes, one of which is humility. So I'm going to say something that you are too humble and nice to say, which is that Teck was arguably the first large mining company to set a nature-positive goal. Why did you do that? And what has been the journey you've been on Nature Positive?
Thanks, Ro. I think the mining sector has been one that has been managing the environment and biodiversity throughout its life, and some would say that's not always been done very well. But as we bring on a new mine, we always look to minimise the impact where we can, or we at least look to manage that impact as best we can. What that means is that the mining sector is more familiar than most sectors with respect to some of the things we're talking about today in terms of managing nature, which puts us in a very interesting position of leadership as Nature Positive comes to the fore. And we're doing this against a backdrop of critical minerals, which are required to support the energy transition. And it's been interesting at Davos over the last 2 years how this discussion around critical minerals has evolved. 2 years ago, we discussed a lot about renewable energy and electric vehicles and batteries, and the conversation sort of stopped there. And there's been this recognition that without more critical minerals, then those are just pipe dreams and will never achieve the decarbonisation goals that we have. So that means for the mining sector that we need to deliver more metals than we currently do today, and we need to deliver them more quickly. But we do that against a backdrop of having to do that in a more responsible way than we've ever done before. And particularly now as we come to understand the emergency that sits in the nature space, and it is an emergency, and it's one that requires urgent action if we're going to halt and reverse nature degradation in the coming years, that we actually have to do both. So we have to mine more quickly than we have before, but we need to be better at taking care of nature than we have before. So, we'd previously had these sort of, no net loss commitments in respect of nature. 2 years ago, we recognized that wasn't enough, and actually we needed to shift to a nature positive position. And what that meant for us at a summary level is that for every 1 hectare of land that we disturb through our activities, we will protect, rehabilitate, conserve at least 3 hectares of land. So that's what leads us to the net positive position, is that 3-to-1 ratio. The other thing we're doing is, actively implementing practices and procedures to progressively rehabilitate our operations as we mine them. So rather than mining something for 20 years and at the end being left with all of the rehabilitation and closure liabilities to manage, we can do that progressively as we work through the life of the mine. It's actually a more economic approach, but perhaps more importantly, it's a far better approach for the communities in which we work because they see this rehabilitation happening. And even more so, it's really important to the indigenous groups, or as we say in Canada, the First Nations, who are, of course, the traditional custodians of this land and have a truly spiritual, ancestral connection with the land, which causes us to think very differently about the impacts that we have and how we manage. So look, we did take that decision 2 years ago. We took it in an absence of real information at that time around what nature positive meant, but we didn't allow that to stop us taking action and making activities. We've entered into a whole range of conservation projects in Canada and in Chile over recent years. We've done things to support the ecosystem around nature, including a $4 billion sustainability-linked loan 2 years ago, and as of this week, we've become an early adopter of the TNFD recommendations because we believe that we have to build an ecosystem to support actions towards nature positive. And as you mentioned before, Ro, that we need to integrate and embed this with decision making in the organization. We've done that. We've forced this, and we had to force it into our capital allocation framework and capital decision making frameworks to ensure that we were investing in nature the way we are as well now in decarb, along with investing in new mines and new equipment.
I'm so pleased you mentioned TNFD, Jonathan, because one of the things I want to point out is that we were proudly the piloting partner for the TNFD framework for the mining and metals industry. We're really behind the goals and objectives of TNFD. It's something that's really important to us, and I'm really pleased to have so many of the ICMM members in that list that TNFD released just this week. Excellent. Now, humility is also a very nice virtue of the Chilean people, I think. And Jonathan underlined the word at least 3 hectares are conserved, protected, or restored for every hectare disturbed. I had the good fortune, thanks to you, Ivan, of visiting one of your sites at Pelambres in Chile. And for quite some time now, you've actually your ratio has been 7-to-1. So tell us about your journey at not just Pelambres, but everything in Chile.
Yeah, look, I think to what Jonathan was saying, as copper producers, I mean, we've been very much focused on the need to grow production to be able to address one of the key challenges, which is climate change. But at the same time, how do we transform what we do in a way that it becomes, sustainable and that it becomes now nature positive in terms of the outcomes that we seek? And I would like to mention just a few things before I get to what you said. First, energy or electricity consumption. I think one of the things that we've been able to do over the years is convert our contracts into 100% renewable energy. So now we are running in Chile, our mines, with 100% renewable energy when it comes down to the electricity that we source. The other is water. Chile has been one of the countries most impacted by climate change. There is drought, and therefore we're moving massive investments to be able to move away from using continental water. Today, 2 of our sites use fully continental waters, and by 2026, with the investments that we're doing, 90% of the water that we use will either be recycled water or water from the sea. And on land, in Pelambres in particular, I was very glad that you visited there. In fact, we are doing preservation and conservation at a rate of 6-to-1, and one of the places is a wetland sanctuary, a Ramsar site, and the other one is a cultural and archaeological heritage site. So a lot of things that we have been doing, but I think this new position statement and commitments put what we're doing at center stage, and also through the global biodiversity framework, which is part of this commitment, we have a much better reference to assess our activities, our effectiveness, and to develop our commitments. So I think we have a lot to do yet, but I think this is a very significant step forward.
I have to tell everybody, one of my favorite things I saw at Pelambres, I'm sorry, a side note, but look, people might be listening to all of this and thinking, yeah, fine, you're saying you do all these things, but do you really do them? Does it actually change factors on the ground? And I have to say, Ivan, one of the things I found most fascinating is at Pelambres you have members of the community that are supported by the company, but they're totally independent. They represent the community who are actually monitoring what's happening at the site. They're monitoring dust levels, they're monitoring the way that the operation is managing its environmental impact. They're not accountable to you, they're accountable to their people in the community. And so people don't have to trust whether you're saying what you're saying is right or not. One of their own people is there to make sure that what you're saying you're doing is actually happening on the ground. And that's a level of transparency that I think is really welcome. Hilda, I'm going to ask you something that may make my chairman question my suitability for my job and think I've lost my mind. Are you a mining company as Norsk Hydro? Because your business is actually very different from their businesses. Tell us how Norsk Hydro as a company thinks about the issue of nature.
Well, we are different from my colleagues here because we are an aluminium and energy company, and we are one of the few companies that have the whole integrated value chain under the Hydro roof. So we are producing bauxite, which is a raw material to produce alumina. We have a smelter portfolio which is based on renewable energy, 80% of it. And we have a special energy division to support that. And we have the largest extrusion system in the world. So we are, in many ways, the user of the bauxite and the alumina to produce the final products that support Martin, for example. But I'm really proud to be part of ICMM because it's really about being in the club of the best performers, and I'm really impressed about what I hear my two colleagues here are working on, and that's also an important objective of ICMM, to learn from each other, and I'm really proud of the commitment that we made last night. I've been together with Jonathan in the committee. And we have pledged this commitment to acknowledge that mining has an impact on nature, and that we have to step up in order to avoid and minimize the impact. But producing aluminium has an impact on nature, and we have a strategy, a nature strategy, that focuses on every step in the value chain. And when we talk about nature positive, it's not only about mining. For example, when we discuss now renewable energy projects, where we discuss to set up a windmill, it's a lot about nature, and it's a lot about nature positive, and how we include and have a dialogue with the local communities where we're faced with not in my backyard. So the nature aspects is evident in the whole value chain of aluminium.
Wonderful. Again, sorry, I have to tell you a personal story. I had the chance again to visit Paragominas, which is a mine that you have in Brazil, where you're mining for bauxite. And for people that have never been to a bauxite mine or seen a bauxite mine, bauxite, of course, exists not very deep, but you do need to disturb quite a large portion of land to extract the bauxite. Hilda, can you tell us a little bit about the technology you're using there to minimize the impact that you're having on, of course, nature, but you're also having this wonderful impact of making your tailings a lot safer? Tell us.
Yeah, we have one mine in Hydro, and that is Paragominas. And people in the audience would know that to get to the bauxite, you have to take the overburden of around 12 meters to get to the bauxite. And what we are very much focused on when we do that is that as fast as we can to rehabilitate and to reforest, because when you take the overburden, you have to take the forest away. We are very cautious about how we restore and how we are able to do that in a 2-year cycle. So we have this 1-to-1 equation where we restore the same as we take down. And to do that, we have collaborated with the Biodiversity Research Consortium, with the University of Para, University of Oslo, in order to really make sure that the quality of the restoration is good enough, and also to monitor the development. And we are celebrating a 10 years anniversary this year, and it's interesting to follow, to see how species and animals are coming back in the forest that we have reproduced. So we have a 1-to-1 at this point, but we have done a feasibility study to see how we can increase that, and that was also why we launched the ambition of no net loss for new mining areas, but also no net loss for existing. And here we see that we have to go beyond our own, let's say, territory. And here we have now collaboration with some of the well-regarded Brazilian NGOs in order to work together for sustainable reforestation in the Amazon, realizing that we are in the most fragile environment in the world. So that's for the biodiversity. We are restoring as fast as we can, so that we don't wait, as you said, to when the mining operation is done. We do it in a 2-year cycle based on the rainy season. But then, to be in mining, it's a lot about movement of materials. The overburden we take out before we can get to the bauxite. And we normally used to put that in tailings. And a few years ago, we introduced a technology that is, when I heard about it, it was almost good to be true. Because this is what we call the dry backfill. So we putting back the overburden as much faster than what we did in the past. And this results that we can avoid tailings going forward. And this is about land use, because these are huge land use for these tailings. But then we also focus on the bauxite residue, which also are big deposits, big tailings. And here we have installed or innovated a new technology, which is about press filter technology, where we squeeze the water to make the tailings more robust and more compact, which has a lot to do with safety. And it's also reduced. The new deposit we have now is 40% less than the old deposit. And in addition to that, we also have a target in Hydro that we should have no landfills by 2040. Wow. So now we're setting up a facility where we try to see how can we use the red mud or the bauxite residue into new applications. And we do that with a joint venture partner in Brazil to see how we can use the components of the red mud into new applications. Wow. So we are really trying to restore and reuse in that part of the value chain.
Amazing. I love the detail, and I can assure you, having been to the site, that actually the areas that have been mined and restored, to my stupid naked eye, look no different to the areas that were not disturbed. And of course, the people that were doing the research told me, and we saw camera traps of jaguars and other animals that have come back to the area that was previously mined. Unfortunately, they said the snakes had come back as well, and that's when I left. So. Now, you talked about partnerships there. Jonathan, in October of last year, I was in the audience as I watched you shake the hand of the president of Chile, President Boric, as you opened QB2, your big new mine in Chile. And I had never really heard a head of state previously talk emotionally about mining. But he was emotional. And anybody who knows Chilean politics knows that he's not necessarily a man to be predisposed to be emotionally positive about mining. But why he was emotional was because your teams had, of course, been a partner to the Chilean government to unearth, preserve, and study one of the most important archaeological finds that have ever happened in Chile as a result of what you were doing at QB2. And why I mention that here, Jonathan, what I want you to talk about is the kind of partnerships and attitude that you have built at Teck that doesn't see nature as different to people. And you talked about the First Nations and indigenous groups, but can you say a bit more about the kinds of organizations you've worked with, third parties, to help build the kind of thing that's resulted in this very positive attitude towards both people and nature?
Yeah, and I think it was very interesting to listen to Hilda's examples there. All of them involved other partners in terms of bringing in the expertise, bringing in the knowledge from elsewhere. And we recognize at Teck that there are many things we can do, but if we don't work with others, our impact will be more localized, and we won't be able to impact the value chain, and we certainly won't be able to have impact at a system level. And also, the expertise that you can get from third parties is incredibly valuable. So one of the things we've been working on, and this is a climate example rather than a nature example, but it's a good illustration, and much of this work was led by Sapanta, who's sitting in the front row here, is what we've called the North Pacific Green Corridor. And this is an initiative to bring together partners throughout the value chain between Canada, Japan and Korea, to try and create a flow of net zero critical minerals and low carbon energy products from Canada to Asia with a closed loop. And what that means is companies like ourselves who have commitments to be net zero have partnered with rail providers, we've partnered with ports, we've partnered with ocean freight providers, and we've partnered with the customers in Asia. And this is something that Teck led and initiated, because we recognize that the impact we could have on our own would be limited to the sites we have in Canada, whereas here we're trying to create change at the value chain level all the way from Canada through to Asia and back again. Similarly then, when we get to nature, and particularly as we look at conservation, there are things we can do at our sites. We partner, as I mentioned, with communities and First Nations in Canada to inform how we can make better decisions around nature, how we can minimize our impact, how we can accelerate the recovery of valuable nature in those regions. But from a conservation perspective, we've entered into a series of projects. For example, in British Columbia, the Darkwoods, which is old-growth rainforest, which are pristine and are many, many hundreds of years old and unfortunately are becoming increasingly scarce. We've partnered there with the Nature Conservancy of Canada because this is what they do all of every day. They figure out how to conserve these areas. We bring funding, a certain level of expertise, but we rely on them to lead in those circumstances. Similarly, in Chile, the Juan Fernandez Archipelago, which is a UNESCO site but sadly is threatened, we've worked there with the Chilean Nature Fund, similarly to leverage their capability to allow us to meet our goals and obligations as they connect to nature positive. So, I think it's all about scale and impact, and what we badly need in this nature space at the moment is scale and speed. And if we try to do everything on our own, we won't achieve either of those things. And scale doesn't mean massive projects, it just means many projects that can start now. And that's really the approach we've taken at Partnership. We're learning a huge amount, but the more we do, the more opportunities we uncover and the faster we'll be able to go.
Martin, Jonathan says partnerships are the way to achieve scale and impact. You, of course, signed this wonderful partnership with Norsk Hydro in November at COP28 in Dubai.
And many more also, in other...
Yeah, tell us more.
No, I couldn't agree more what I've heard here, and I'm getting super excited listening to the whole community here, because, in order to succeed, we are moving from a brown, fossil-based platform into a green platform. It's a systemic change, and everyone needs to do it coordinated in one way or another. And I fully agree also that, it will come by the many good examples adding up to, a systemic shift, because it will be the better choice. And I would add, our favorite expression that we are utilizing in Volvo is actually that partnership is the new leadership. Because you cannot succeed yourself, so to be a true leader, you need to embrace open source partnership to share the values. And interesting enough, on this, by coincidence, actually, we have, and that was foresighted leaders in the Volvo Group in the late 80s actually instituted the Volvo Environment Prize, which was not on the agenda during those days, if I have to put it like that. And that is an independent foundation that we are funding, but we have a scientific jury and we have a scientific committee doing the choices in all areas of environment. And this very year, it was Professor Eduardo Brondisio, and he's a Brazilian professor working in the United States, exactly on the topic that you're talking about here. And he gave, of course, the problem formulation has been particularly working in the Amazonas, but he also gave a lot of, concrete solutions where it has actually been positive outcomes. And many of them, you are much more experts in this area, but I'm so happy to hear that it coincides with the conclusion he has about, agroforestry coming back, smart utilization, rehabilitation as you go along, the social, so to speak, transparency and inclusion in order to be successful. And the interesting part of that is that when we see all the external viewers for this environment prize, this was one of the biggest, feedbacks we got both externally and internally in Volvo. Wow, we want to learn more, etc. And we cannot do that in Volvo, but we need to have trusted partners that we know have the right methodology, the right commitment, the right values that we share, that we can trust. Because if we trust that, then we can just continue to scale it, and it will not be the Swedish blah, blah, blah. It will be action.
Jack, partnership is the new leadership. That is the World Economic Forum's next tagline, and if you use it, you owe him some money for a trademark. Look, if there's one place, literally one place, where the idea of partnerships and working with everybody else to make scale happen, you can see it in reality. I saw it downstream at Pelambres. The Chuapa Valley, which is where Pelambres is located, from the mine to the port, literally pit to the port, which is what you do, you are helping coordinate, I don't know how many different people to make that valley lush, green, thriving, nature. It's just an amazing thing. You help grow wine grapes, and the wine is very good, I have to say, for anybody who hasn't tried it. But Ivan, how do you coordinate all these people that you've managed to do in the Chuapa Valley to make it
I think one of the main challenges that we have in our Pelambres operation is that, we do mining alongside agriculture. And I think that's not common. In Chile, most of the mining is done in the desert. So that has meant a very different level of interaction and working with communities, especially, for example, when water has been an issue. And that's why one of the actions, the key that we're taking is actually moving out of using continental water to release that water for other purposes. But I would like to maybe focus on something different. We've talked here about value chain, which I think is absolutely crucial. And one of the challenges that I've found is how to engage small suppliers so that they also align with the targets that we have, but without compromising their ability to be able to grow and deliver the business because of their small capability. And I think from that point of view, we've developed a program which is called Suppliers, for the Future, which essentially involves setting targets in collaboration with our suppliers, but without making or forcing them commercially, which would be one way of collaborating, which is basically saying we will sign a contract to you to the extent that you sign up to this target. But that's not, I think, the approach. So we're basically work with them to say each one will set a target according to its own capability, but we will have a common target where we want to go, and we will walk together to that end. And we actually develop a partnership with a university who provided those suppliers, the smaller ones, with the management capability to be able to work the systems and transform the way they do the business. So I think that's been a very significant achievement for us, and something that we're very proud of and we want to continue to do, because this cannot be at the expense of not being able to achieve smaller supplier development, which is, the health of a lot of these communities.
Look, you'll agree with me, this has not been blah, blah, blah. They've been specific, they've been clear, really, you can see the passion and commitment from all four of them. So, now is your time to ask them and to tell us what's on your mind before we're going to close with a lovely, lovely example from my dear friend here. Jeremy first. You're going to get a mic.
Go on, do the whole thing.
Do the whole thing.
So I'm Jeremy from Systemic. Jonathan, I loved what the whole panel said, by the way, and this has been the best panel of my Davos so far.
Jack?
Best panel, partnership is leadership, all of that. You said one thing that was really, many things profound, but one particularly, which is we had to force nature into the capital allocation framework. I think everybody heard that. So it was the only part of the conversation where someone said, actually, we've got to make the business case for this. We had to force it into the capital allocation framework. Can you just talk a bit more? Because what will make this scale at speed is if you don't have to force it in, but investors want it, obviously customers want it, the business case is strong enough, the risk reduction is strong enough. So just walk us through, how did you force it? How do we make it something that you don't need to force so that the whole thing can actually scale at speed? Good point.
Yeah, the reason I put it that way is because today it's very hard to assign financial metrics to nature. You can assign risk metrics, you can look at the impact it can have on your operations, and if you look at the analog of carbon, of course, as we always do in this space, in many countries there's a price on carbon. There's a very high price on carbon in Canada, and it's expected to go to $170 a ton. What that does is incentivizes you to invest in decarbonisation because there's a clear business case that you can demonstrate for those investments. In the case of nature today, we can't ascribe value in the same way as we would. We might never get that perfect. So we started off by forcing it into the system. What we then did, however, is started to spend more time with the indigenous groups or the First Nations in Canada because they really value nature, and they don't value it in economic terms the way that we do, but they have this deep connection to nature. And traditionally in our industry, as we've worked with First Nations or indigenous groups, we've put in place agreements where we financially compensate them for using their land, and we make other commitments around capability building, for example. But that is not the primary value that they want to receive from mining companies. What is valuable to them is the land and the way that we use that land, and hence the way we design and manage our operations. So if you start to think differently about value and you start to walk in somebody else's shoes when you do that, you can start to think through ways in which you can value nature differently and you can drive different decisions. Now, ultimately, it would be great if we could get to a point of sort of nature credits. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do, though, because in the case of carbon, all carbon molecules are the same. So if governments could get their act together and sort of work out the cross-border implications of carbon taxes, that is something that's solvable. But every element of nature is different, and it's inherently local. It's not globally transferable. So I think we have to think through different ways of doing that. We have to understand different perspectives. We have to walk in others' shoes. And until that happens, we sort of have to have the faith to invest. I would say, however, though, that investing in nature makes for a better business. It makes it resilient on one hand, because when you've got properly vegetated land, you have lower risk of flooding. When I visited these old growth rainforests that I was talking about in British Columbia, had quite a profound experience. So I was in an area where last year had been devastated by forest fires. And these forest fires had ripped through all of the new growth, and when they hit the old growth, they extinguished. And you can see a bright line of destruction and preserved old forest because they're wet. You know, the land is wet, the trees are wet, and the fires were extinguished. So you've created a natural barrier there through the preservation of old growth forest that you can use to protect your operations. And finally, and I firmly believe in the case of nature, but this goes to being a responsible operator and focus on sustainability more broadly, that it leads to competitive advantage. We all want more access to more critical minerals that we can develop to support the energy transition. Communities shouldn't give us access to those minerals unless we can demonstrate that we will behave in a responsible fashion. So, I do think it's good for business from a resilience and competitive advantage perspective, but we do need to collectively work on valuing nature. And this is a great example of an area where our organization is unlikely to crack that. There will be many great minds in the world who can help us get to a point where I can feed numbers into my capital allocation framework to make those decisions simpler.
Beautiful. Anything else, Ivan?
No, just to add to that, I think one of the things in handling emissions is that in Chile, for example, there's no pricing for carbon, but we have incorporated shadow pricing in our decisions. And I think that's a good way of, finding a mechanism creatively to, price, the cost of emissions. So I share with Jonathan, we have the challenge of developing something similar for nature. Not only for, I would say, investment decisions and capital allocation, but I think also very importantly for performance assessment. I mean, we need to get nature into the performance scorecards and measurements of management. And I think that's also a very critical element to be able to drive the right behavior and create the right incentives.
Martin, do you use tools like that? And then we'll come to Hilda.
Yes, we do, and I will not even call it shadow pricing actually, because if that is, for example, a corporate price, and we are doing that more and more, I should argue, and we have Andrea here as our Chief Purchasing Officer also for the group, we are really trying to get to that point so we can see where do we turn the needle, how can we really incentivize it, and how can we utilize also that as a good argument in our conversations with our customers and customers, because the thing is, and that I think is a big shift also this Davos, is that we have a much more in-depth discussion about the Scope 3 cooperation. And that will force, in a very positive manner, us to cooperate in the value chains in a completely different way, including then taking into account what we have heard from everyone here around also the biodiversity and nature, and would love to contribute how we can also make that argument, so to speak, from our side. So when we are getting better informed and understand the efforts, that will also come with, the development that we have seen on the carbon side. So absolutely super important to continue to drive this, because in the long run, I remember Jakoka said it well. He said, when it was the big rush on ISO 9000 and quality systems, etc. in the 80s, he said it well. He said, you can implement ISO 9000 if you like, but don't let that disturb the quality work. And my point about that is really that what I'm getting super excited about is when I listen to the colleagues here, it's for real. We want to do it for real, and we are doing it step by step, learning, sharing, very good ideas. One thought maybe coming from an industry that has also been, very focused on production and really, driving efficiencies in all shapes. I mean, scope 1, scope 2 is history in that sense. And so now it's the scope 3. It is that I think mining historically, and I mean, bear with me now. So from unconscious incompetence is a good state of mind, right? Because then you can challenge a little bit. But it has been the business of the big. And if you look at the car side and also in the industrial side, it has been, huge batch production has moved into single piece flow. And that has changed the whole industry, because then you can really produce tailor-made trucks or buses and not going for to end stock, so to speak. I think when you are talking about, taking step by step, and not to say, okay, we do the whole rehabilitation at the end of the mining life. It's actually moving from a big batch production in the mining world into single piece flow. So when you have taken that part of the mine, then you do the rehabilitation. And as you said, it makes economic sense, but I think it will make a lot of social sense. And I think it will make a lot of risk sense, and it will make also a lot of environmental sense. So I think there is it's not the flip side of that coin. It's moving to a single piece flow.
Martin, you're blowing my mind. I never thought about it that way, from batch to single piece. Hilda?
Yeah, I think it's very exciting times now, because we see a systemic shift is starting to happening, and the First Mover Coalition is a good example of that, where we see that customers setting their Scope 3 target, and the First Mover is really about creating a market for the low carbon products and towards zero. And we have entered this partnership with Volvo, but we also have other partnerships. And what I found very interesting was that one of these partnerships was we discussed the CO2, and we discussed how we could get to zero. But before we signed that partnership, the customer went to Brazil to actually see how we were working on biodiversity. They went to see how we were working in the social community, in terms of human rights, in terms of that we could be a very good force for the local community, and that the community actually wanted us to be there. And that's at least a proof point, in the sense that it's probably not easy to sort of calculate the effect on the nature at this point, but we see that customers are starting to set a target also, not only on CO2, but for the nature effect and the social effect, because it's about resilience, it's about working with responsible producers, and I find that very exciting.
I love that idea. Triangle, again, like what you told us. Now, we're going to close soon, but I'm going to give the last word to the man who made me fall in love with the idea of nature-positive mining. Because when I went to see what you were doing there, Eduardo, and Eduardo's the CEO of Vale, what you're doing in the Amazon really made me, for the first time, truly understand the power of nature-positive mining. So the final word is to you, either to tell us a bit more about that or anything else you've heard today. Please stand up and come.
Thank you. He didn't tell me that. Anyhow, well, I think it's conscious of time. I'll try to be brief. Brazilians are not brief. The fact that we have a lot of learning. Sorry. So I'll come. It's okay. I'll do the same as Jack. I'll do the same as Jack. Okay. It's a 40 years old story. So I'm just telling the story. I'm going to try to be fast forward. And he knows a little bit about, because we are neighbors. We used to run the Paragominas mine. And we discovered Carajás by accident in the middle of the Amazon, 900 kilometers from the coast. And so when you fast forward 40 years, what do you have? And I showed to Benedict. He has the GIF. Then it's hard to envision that. But we have a piece of land isolated from the Amazon. So I'm going to say the A and B of the story. That is the size, 5 times the size of London. And we occupy 2% of the land. And why is that? We can go to the B part, but let's go to the nice part before. Because in 1998, the federal government decided to create a national forest. We started to mine in 1978. Our first shipment was in 1985. But a very important piece of this information is that half of this land is indigenous. So we need to collaborate with them. When we arrived there, there were 300 people. Now there are 1,500 people. and they have 14 villages. They used to have one. And I show something that for me is extremely striking in this A part. When you see the mosaic of Carajás, there is a straight line. There is no Trump wall, there is no fence, there is nothing. There is only a green part here and a devastated part here. And that goes to the things that we need to do outside our fences. So the first part is a commitment enforced by law, and we do it together with the agency, the ICMB, for the Brazilians that are here, IBAMA, so we work together, we have to collaborate with them. We have to collaborate with the indigenous people as well. And of course, to our business, let's get to the business side here, we need to understand deeply that environment, that biome. Otherwise, we don't get the license to expand. Carajás is a 40-year-old mine. We cannot expand today, as we speak. Our biggest discussion is around the biome, the diversity, how can we still preserve. Luckily, 14 years ago, we developed the Institute Technological, a valley, that we know more genomes in the Carajás biome than in the UK. We have like 1,200 genome maps. So there's a mix of technology, a mix of commitment, a mix of collaboration, and that it's a nice part. The B part is that we have to do much more, because what's outside of our fence is not what we want to have. And that's why we set the goal for 500,000 hectares valley, and I said that yesterday. It's awkward. It's a paradox, because we are like armadillos. Is armadillos the same thing in English?
Yeah,
like
armadillo.
a tattoo. We just dig holes. We need the nature to continue digging holes. And we need that for our business. We need that. It's our business. Our business is nature. So it doesn't make any sense not to do it. And even by law, you have to compensate. So I think this is what you saw. That is not from it's just, I'm just a privileged spectator of that. And again, it's a nice story. It's compelling. Benedict did as well. He flew. You can flew 1 hour and a half in a helicopter over the jungle. But unfortunately, we are detached from the jungle. So we have this dream to reconnect ourselves to the Amazon, because we can do that. We have the strength, and by the way, we won't do it by ourselves. It's impossible. We're going to have to do, like Hilda mentioned, people that are going to come together, regenerate. You can still buy land and regenerate. So as I said, I stood up the time. I hope it was useful. It's true, we're very proud of that. And I think mining should be trying to convey this message much more, because we are the ones that can really protect the nature. We are the most interested part on this, the most ones. Even agriculture. We are much more than agriculture, by the way. But again, sorry for the...
Look, if we had more time, I would have actually asked Benedict to tell us about, and Benedict's CEO of Eurasian Resources Group, ERG, about how he's using incredible technology to both improve the mining process, and it has huge impacts on nature and people as well. We won't have time for that. But, a legend of Davos has said that this is the best panel at Davos. And I couldn't agree more, because you were real, you were sincere, you were specific, you were honest, and I really thank you very much for that. Please give them a round of applause.
Good, great. Thank you.
You've been told the key, lots of philosophy. As soon as you've been told the key, lots of philosophy. As soon as you've been told the key, lots of philosophy.